Hello, everybody. Happy time of day.
Oh.
Hello, good morning from the U.S. East Coast.
You're lost in the woods, David.
It's a good place to be.
Folks, we have an action-packed agenda today. If I could ask everyone to sign in, we'll wait a few moments and see if we have TAC quorum, and then we'll proceed. While we're waiting for the TAC to roll in, do we have a volunteer to be our scribe today?
I will help.
Thank you. I was told in advance that Isaac has a domestic conflict and he may be a little late, so we may move the supply chain chat a little bit later in the call, depending on when he arrives. I see Dustin, I see Bob, I see Arnaud. Are a couple light. We'll give it another moment or so.
I see London. I see France.
Right.
Sorry, you made that too easy.
Eva is here. Let's see, we're missing Dan and Zach. Oh, Zach's here. Haha. Great. Well, let us get started on our amazing adventure today. Looks like every TAC member is here with the exception of Mr. Lawrence. We'll see if he pops in a little bit later. Let us start at the top. We have been going through a backlog scrub, and we'd like to briefly talk about TAC issue 161. Who would like to help lead us with this?
Yeah, I guess I can take a stab at that.
Thank you, sir.
So we've created a pull request to define the SIG lifestyle life cycle document like we have for projects and working groups. There are a few open questions under discussion, including should SIGs report to the TAC or working groups, or should they just report to working groups? Our existing documentation says that they only report to working groups, but for example, the Diagrammer Society reports to the TAC directly. Also under discussion is if SIGs need to have meetings, and also I think independent repositories in the OpenSSF organization. I should say that I don't actually have a very strong opinion about any of these items, other than helping the group reach consensus on them, with the exception of ensuring that there's enough breadcrumbs so that someone who is not well-versed in the OpenSSF, or someone who is coming at this from outside the OpenSSF, could be able to find and participate in SIGs, even if they're not already part of the regular working group. And with that, I guess I will open it to the floor.
I will commit to spend some time later this week to review all the commentary and provide any feedback I might have. Any other thoughts?
My initial take is that if a SIG already reports to a working group, that's good enough. If a SIG does not have a working group home, then the TAC should be the default home. I don't think having two bosses, so to speak, lends itself to agility and things like that. Certainly TAC should have visibility, but.
And I would posit that the Diagrammer Society reporting to the TAC is an artifact of the TAC having asked a question and asked for help rather than a structural intention, and that it should move under a working group now that it has sort of matured and produced outputs that the TAC has seen and the board has seen. And yeah, that would put all SIGs under working groups. And I think that's certainly the structure I had in mind a year ago.
Any additional feedback or comments?
Well, so if I may ask, Eva, I mean, can you elaborate as to what's the downside of having one, or maybe, I wouldn't expect this to be the default per se, contrary to what Mike said, but I think it makes sense to allow it. There may be cases like this where we just can't figure out which working group is the most natural place, and the TAC says, fine, we can just have it here.
I can imagine future situations where the TAC says this, well-scoped effort should be spun up. There's not a home yet. Let's put it under the TAC for now. But ideally, it moves under a working group, in my opinion, so that the number of reports the TAC has, virtually speaking, is bounded by the larger organizational artifact of a working group. So if that is what you have in mind, Arnaud, that the SIG can spin up under the TAC, but find a home eventually, then I think we're saying the same thing.
Almost. I mean, for me, like the Diagrammer Society, if it stayed there, I agree with you. We don't want to overload the TAC with too many SIGs. That becomes unmanageable. But I would think the TAC can address that as we go and say, well, this is getting out of control, really ought to move those. But that still means that it becomes more, how we manage it from a governance point of view. We still allow SIGs to be on, to report to the TAC. That's all.
All right, so please provide your feedback on that issue. We will, how close, barring this recent chat here, Zach, about how close do you feel we are to getting consensus? We near, far?
I definitely have changes planned based on the feedback I've received so far. I will commit to updating this pull request by the end of the week. And so if you want your feedback to be included, please ensure that's in place by, let's say, end of Wednesday or end of Thursday.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Let us move on to our exciting working group updates. I see Mr. Bresser's here, and we're going to get an update from the tooling working group and the supply chain integrity group today. So Josh, why don't you take it away? You have 10 minutes, sir.
Sweet. I hopefully won't need 10 minutes. I'll share my screen. All right. So I'm Josh. For anyone who doesn't know, I lead the security tooling working group, which is kind of an empty shell we use to support the SBOM everywhere SIG. I don't know what it's called, but most of this is kind of be about SBOM everywhere. The way the group works is there's kind of two projects underneath it. There's SBOM everywhere, which I'm also the lead of, and then there's a fuzzing collaboration group. I have an update from them. I normally don't because they are doing a marvelous job of being self-sufficient, but I did talk to them. They're doing an amazing amount of work, which is really cool. And then there's also some inactive projects that are kind of remnants of the tooling group. Every now and then someone shows up and says, oh, we should start this back up. And I say, yes, you should. And then they never come back. So it's kind of one of those situations. But I mean, these are cool ideas. I'd love to see them go somewhere. There's just kind of nobody's in charge of them. And so they're going to sit for the foreseeable future. I'll start with fuzzing. If you go to the presentation, there's a link in the notes here that'll get you to this. I asked the fuzzing working group for an update and they sent me this, which is enormous. So they've been really busy. but kind of the short version of what they do for everyone here is they have a project they call Fuzz Introspector, which is where they take fuzzing results and then they do some analysis on those to understand what are they finding, what does it mean, what's going on. And I'm sure many of you have heard of OSS Fuzz, which is an open source fuzzer. It's really cool and it does some amazing stuff. And basically that's kind of the foundational piece of this. And then they take results from OSS Fuzz and they interpret them and look at them. And I'll let you follow the link. You don't need me to kind of go through that, but they've got their own group. The meetings are listed. If you go to the tooling working group GitHub page, there's a link to these folks. And I mean, they're great people. And obviously if you have any interest in it, I know they'd love to talk to you, but and kind of the second piece then is SBOM Everywhere. This is what I lead and it's what I find exciting. So I'm going to talk about this probably more than anything. So we've had a couple of projects ongoing for several months. I mean, part of these are is it always amuses me that it feels like we should be able to get a group like this up and running in like a week, and it takes literally months. I mean, we've been at this for a year at this point, and we're grinding along. And one of the perpetual challenges we have that all the other groups have is people show up for meetings, but getting people to do work outside of the meetings is often difficult. And so a lot of our meetings are working sessions where we go through the documentation, we go through some of these plans to get an idea of what we are trying to do. So what we've done the last couple of meetings have been asking some like actual real world SBOM use cases to come and talk to us. This is where we had these projects and companies where these are folks doing SBOM work, like Istio, EvoS, and Yocto are actual open source projects. And we basically wanted them to come and tell us, what are you doing with SBOMs? How are you using them today? What were some of your challenges? What's going on? And the reason we did that is we have this plan here that is it's a pull request out of a repo of mine, I believe. But we have this grand vision of how to bring SBOM to open source. And one of the things we've realized is we can't tell open source, like, you need to do this, right? Like, we can't put together some big playbook and say, okay, open source, take this and do it. Because they're going to be like, yeah, whatever, like, go pound sand, we don't care. And that's fine. That's open source, right? That's kind of how it works. And so what we want to do is put together a team of people who have knowledge and the will to do the work and to go to like one or two open source projects to start and literally just say, we're literally going to do all of the work for you. We want to understand what it looks like if an open source project is producing SBOMs and then distributing those SBOMs, because we think we know what that looks like, but we don't. And so the intention is, and this is all kind of laid out in here, we want to basically build a team, send them out and then start writing down what we learn, because we're going to learn tons of stuff, right? Like, as we all know, it's like in theory, that's in practice, or what is it in practice that works in theory, and in theory that's only works in practice kind of stuff. And so we want to just like literally go to them and work with them and understand, what does this look like? What are we going to do? How does this work? And then obviously at the end, then we can start asking for more and saying to the OpenSSF, if we had these resources, this is what we could do with them. Because today, anything I sent to you would be made up crap for sure. And so this one's kind of exciting, and it's slow going, but we're putting it together and we've been talking about it. And I feel like this is the plan that's going to drive us forward. And then kind of building on that, there's a use cases for security document that Kate Stewart started quite some time ago, and we've been working on it. Ignore the top of this. If you look at it, you kind of got to go down to where the use cases start. And I would say producer of software is where it actually starts getting good. And this is where we're just trying to write down some of like, what does it mean to generate SBOMs? What is the value? Like, who is the consumer of it? What is the benefit to me? Because I mean, one of the challenges we have is if an open source project says, why should I do this? We don't have a strong answer for them today. And some projects we may never have a strong answer for, and that's just something we're going to have to accept. And then the last piece is we want an SBOM landscape. I'm sure you're all familiar with the CNCF landscape, which is massive and awesome and amazing. And we want to do something similar for SBOMs. There is an SPDX landscape that exists today and Kate has given me permission to mangle it into an overall SBOM landscape. It's just we need time to do it, and it's stalled because I haven't had time. Kate hasn't had. No one's had time, but it's on the list, and it's still, I think, going to be the best thing because everyone loves the landscape because you can point and click, and it's awesome, and I love them. But anyway, that's kind of my update. You all have any questions, comments, concerns? I see a hand up, Zach.
Go ahead, Zach.
Yeah, Josh, I apologize in advance because this is a question about the fuzzing SIG. At first, I thought that the SIG was fuzzing to uncover issues and then letting people know about those issues. But upon further reading, it looks like they're providing tooling for people to understand their fuzzing coverage and increase their fuzzing coverage. Is that latter understanding correct?
Yeah, as far as I know, yes. I know the OSS Fuzz project has some uncovering issues work happening, but I don't have enough knowledge to comment on how many things they're finding or what that looks like today.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Michael, and then Ava.
I just posted in chat, but Mikhail from Eclipse is pushing out SBOM across all of Eclipse.
Nice.
So he'd be a great place of knowledge because they're doing it kind of on their own. Like we're not super involved in the specifics there, but I know I've been getting some updates. So they've definitely had it rolling on some projects. So feel free to ping Mikhail and.
No, that's fantastic. Thank you so much, Michael. I will. Yeah. I'll find him, and I might bug you if I.
He's on Slack. Yeah.
Okay. Good. Awesome.
I was going to say the same thing about Eclipse and just remind Josh and everyone else that there are some groups doing this to lean on and learn from like the work Eclipse is doing. You've got Istio listed here, but not Kubernetes, which has been generating SBOMs for a while. There's a couple other projects that do that and a couple other foundations that have been investing in doing it as well. Mm-hmm. As far as the SBOM use cases and SBOM landscape, there were, I'd say, in the past 3 years, multiple efforts. Kate's is an admirable one. There have been several others that are also published around different taxonomies or approaches to mapping the landscape, that if there is a dedicated group that's going to try to pick this work back up, you might start by collecting 3 or 4 different past incomplete surveys and building from that collection instead of just one.
If you have those, Ava, I would love to have them. If you can just send me a link in Slack or something.
I'll follow up with you on that.
Thank you.
On the SBOM use cases, check out the work that the CISA SBOM working groups have produced, as they have a number of these studies published around use cases. And again, prior work to leverage so you don't have to start from scratch.
Yep, for sure.
My question, Josh, was, do you have anyone participating in the CISA groups? I got roped in because of Vex, and there are some interesting opinions.
There's various overlaps. There's not like an official collaboration. I mean, partially because CISA is weird about that. They're the government, so they have to be careful. But I mean, a bunch of the CISA folks show up to our meetings. We have a bunch of people in their meetings. So there's contamination, maybe might be the best word for
cross-pollination
happens. What's that?
Maybe cross-pollination.
I'm comfortable with contamination, but like, yeah, I think one of the things I always say, Chris, is the intention of SBOM everywhere is to do nothing. And what I mean by that is I don't want us to be like the group that says, oh, we have to do the work and all the documents have to live with us. But this is where I view the landscape being of value, is if we can start connecting some of these people, because there's like 7,000 SBOM groups scattered across the universe at this point, and half of them don't know who the other half are. And I would love it if we can be the connective tissue between all of them. That's the dream.
And Sal, you'll be our last question on this topic.
Yeah, just one thing on the SBOMs. I mean, we can talk, a lot of this is like talk around the templates and what should be in them. And that's all SBOMs are, right? A template. But the implementation is still very hard. I always have to remind people that when I did the security slam last year, one CNCF project had an SBOM. There's more now. But I think really keeping the focus, and it is hygienic to me if we consider scanning and really making sure that there's a reference for projects in an ecosystem. For me, that was really important, and that'll help us to standardize.
For sure. Yep. And that's kind of the idea behind that plan, is to have that reference that we can point at for if they want us to come and help them, great. Or if they want to do it on their own, also great. Just making sure that we have those resources for whoever is doing the work. Absolutely.
Super informative update. Thank you very much, Josh.
Awesome.
If anyone has any additional questions, ping Josh in Slack or attend one of his calls.
That's right.
Isaac, are you ready and able to talk?
I am, yeah. Can you hear me okay?
We can, yes. Please proceed, sir.
Awesome.
10 minutes.
Should I be projecting the slides, or is someone else doing that?
I don't have any of your slides.
I can project,
so I'd love
no
for
problem.
You to share.
That's all we need then. Right. Do you all see this slide?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. So I've got a fair amount of material to cover. I'm going to try and keep it to 10 minutes. I know it's a super busy agenda today. So there's a bunch of kind of reference material that are left inside of this slide. I'm not proposing to go all the way through it. But links to click on and things to follow there if you're interested in following up. Supply Chain Integrity Working Group has subgroups, the SCI positioning. I'll talk a little bit about that as we come to talk more about SALSA. Obviously, we have SALSA and S2C2F and Fresca as the major parts of SCI today. In terms of the headlines for this update, one of the substantive things we've been working on for the last several months has been this shared vision doc, and trying to figure out, how do we think about the scope and priorities, mission and vision of the SCI working group. And so that's been a couple of quarters in the making, but we've got that to a stage now where there's sufficient consensus in the group that we've posted this to GitHub as our draft charter. Noted on the slide here is we're now awaiting TAC review and sign off. I don't think that that's a necessary part. I don't think that's like a necessary formal part of the process, but I think that there's many in the group, me included, who would love to have the TAC review that and go, yeah, that looks good, or provide comments on it, but give us some kind of signal as to whether, there's general feeling that we're on the right track. So that's the working group charter. S2C2F, I know Jay is here on the call and he can add more detail as he has it. We have the 1.0 of the specification. We are making incremental updates as we get feedback from the community, as adopters give us feedback on S2C2F. We're incorporating that feedback into the framework. SALSA 1.0 launched a couple of months ago, 3 months ago now in April, and right about the same time, we had the announcement from NPM and GitHub that they were adopting SALSA and SIGSTOR for provenance in the NPM ecosystem, which is super encouraging. The largest language package ecosystem out there. We would love to see adoption from other package ecosystems. This is not going to happen overnight, but now we're at a stable, I think 1.0. Someone commented the other day that 1.0 signifies stability, not completeness. We're certainly not done with the specification. There's more concerns we want to add, and we want to increase SALSA scope over time, but SALSA 1.0 is at least a stable specification that people can build against. I'm going to call briefly to Guac. As many of you know, Guac applied to join the OpenSSF and in hopes to join the SCI working group. I think it'll be a great fit. We discussed that at our most recent meeting. No objections in the group. I sent out a formal call for comments on the mailing list to see if there's any more opinions or objections out there. But absent objections, I would love to welcome Guac into the working group. And then Fresca we'll talk a little bit more about later, but the TLDR there is that it's pretty much stalling. I think its most viable future is coalescence with the Sterling toolchain or Sterling tool belt, whatever that thing is called now. But I think that there's sufficient overlap in the set of concerns and the thinking there that I think perhaps merging these two efforts gives Fresca a viable future. In terms of the mission itself, I think, again, to the right-hand side of this slide is where I direct your attention. This statement here, scalable, standardized, and testable practices for supply chain security, I think is how we think about the SCI working group's mission. SALSA is one of these frameworks. It's, yes, scalable, it's standardized, it's testable, and it's a set of practices for supply chain security. S2C2F, similarly, we don't have an attestation format yet, but direction is very much on mission. And then in terms of the vision here, we're looking for, a pragmatic supply chain security framework covering key functional areas. So you think of SALSA today, the 1.0 covers build and provenance. There's other areas of concern that we can expand SALSA to, or expand other frameworks in the SCI working group to cover. We would like to get these security practices evaluable by downstream automation. Yes, there's a benefit in pushing these as best practices just as themselves, but I think we extract additional benefit in terms of pragmatic security by actually being able to allow downstream people to implement policy based on what they see in terms of practice adoption upstream. And so, yes, it's about SALSA as a set of practices at the end of the day, but a key part of SALSA is a standard attestation format which can be trusted by downstream actors when they're looking to actuate policy downstream. And then obviously, we'd love to drive ubiquity of this framework in open source. And my feeling is that driving ubiquity in open source makes this framework an inevitability for almost everywhere else in the software industry, including enterprise. And I think enterprise adoption of framework will be demand driven and through necessity of working with the open source ecosystem. In picture form, we've been thinking a little bit about this idea of the supply chain control plane. This metadata and attestation fabric spanning the SDLC. And so you'll see here this kind of schematic, this concept diagram of an SDLC from left to right. You've got upstream supply entering your operational domain. You've got some policy. And I think a key part here is that we see policy as evaluated and actuated at every step of the SDLC. There's a lot of focus today on admission time policy, admission control policy towards the right-hand side of this diagram. I think that we have a broader conceptualization of policy where actually you want to implement policy when you first establish a dependency from upstream. You want to establish policy when you're doing a build. Does this the materials meet the right set of checks when it comes to source management practices and so on. And then the ability for each step in the SDLC to publish into the supply chain control plane metadata and attestations to enable downstream evaluation. And what this looks like is an example here that if a build produces signed SALSA provenance, that provenance can then be verified and evaluated at mission control time here. And similarly, if there's parts of your upstream which produce SALSA provenance, you can verify and evaluate this further left here when you establish those dependencies. And I think that there's connections that we want to make and allow this control plane to be a source of canonical metadata about upstream practices, upstream artifacts, and evaluable by policy left to right through the SDLC. And this is an emerging kind of set of thinking and concepts, but it gives you a sense of how these things fit together and where the group's going directionally. I'm going to pause here. I'm about 8 minutes in. I've got slides per work stream, but I wonder if there's any areas that we can focus on, or whether I should just take questions and allow for offline review of the rest of the deck.
I think the latter is a better approach, Isaac, since we just have a little under 3 minutes. What questions, what would we like to learn more about the SCI group here and their activity?
I could certainly skip forward to this one. This is potentially, if there's one thing I wanted to cover, it would be this one, which is Grob. I know that you reviewed the charter document, provided some comments in that. That was awesome. It would just be renewing and re-upping my desire and request for the TAC to take a look at this thing, give any comments. We would like to have confidence that we're moving in the right direction as a working group. I think internally we have that confidence. We're looking for some external validation, really. And so anything the TAC can do along those lines would be great. I think, again, maybe not a topic for right now, but in general, it would be great to have some work between Fresca and Sterling Toolchain looking at what is the possible synergy, Sparkle synergy with those two groups. Is there an opportunity to merge the two sets of concerns? You got it, Crow, you've got the action there. And investigate more in terms of, is there work that we can leverage forward from Fresca into the Sterling Toolchain effort? My suspicion is that there is, but I would love to have the TAC look more closely at that as well. And then this third one, super technical. We had some of these questions arrive when we added F2C2F to the working group, that there was a general lack of consensus on exactly what the process is for adding a thing to a working group, and what that thing is called when it's added. Is it a SIG? Is it a project? Is it a whatever? And how the process varies per the nature of the thing that's being added. We're going to feel our way through with Guac again. I don't think that we're going to get terribly stuck, but I would point to generally, I've not been able to find any clearly documented process for what this looks like. A thing comes to OpenSSF, has a desire to land in a working group. What does that look like end to end? We're feeling our way through. We'll get there. The wheels aren't falling off by any means, but if there was some tax cycles to look at documenting that process and getting agreement on it, that would be kind of awesome.
Clarification.
And that is my 10 minutes, and I'm going to stop.
Yeah, I believe the process is at this point just work with the staff, right?
Got it.
The TAC
Okay.
voted, and now it's between the current owner of the IP and staff to move it forward.
Got it. And in terms of in terms of landing in the SCI working group specifically versus any other working group, I mean, I think what you've described, yes, in terms of how something gets added to OpenSSF, but how does it land in a specific working group? Is there guidance there?
That's a great point. If our docs are missing that, we should add that.
And that is some of the work that Zach is helping work specific to SIGs. And I know that Omkar, as he and the staff go through and do a foundation audit, they're looking to identify gaps like this. Where we need a little bit more guidance for folks.
Yep. And again, I'm not pointing to anything that's on fire or the wheels are falling off. We're going to get this done. I think for people who follow in our footsteps, more documentation would be super helpful. And maybe we can produce it as part of this process. Who knows?
David?
Yeah, just real quick. As far as staff process mentioned, fundamentally it's an intellectual rights kinds of things. We don't require copyright assignments, but we need to make sure the licenses are okay, and if there's any domain names or trademarks or patents involved, then there's needs to be additional discussions. As far as accepting the working groups, at least historically, it's been basically within the working group they vote.
Okay.
So, basically both parties have to agree to join before they join. I mean,
got it. And does that vote happen again? Does that vote happen necessarily in a GitHub issue? Can it be a show of hands in a meeting plus the mailing list call out, or what's the level of formality that goes with that vote?
It depends on what your community accepts. Each working group's a little different. You should have that written down in your charter, hopefully, of how you do votes, but some do show of hands in a call, a verbal. Some of them want a formal vote in a GitHub issue. Others do email poll.
I will go back and double check our governance and see exactly what's called for. But appreciate that. Thank you.
Whatever the working group accepts as their voting process, we respect that.
Awesome. And thanks for your time in this forum. And any questions you have about this, or the stuff that you review offline or stuff that I talked about here, hit me up in Slack or come to the working group. Really glad to have engagement and from the TAC as we go.
So, and mention to the Fresca folks that the tool belt meets weekly in 30 minutes from now. We would love to have them show up and chat.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. If you have additional questions or comments for the SCI group, if we can get a link to that presentation, Isaac, that'd be groovy so we can review that. Please route them to Isaac or show up to a supply chain call. Sounds like some exciting progress in both there and the tooling group. Thank you both groups for sharing today.
Absolutely. And Grob, if I send you a link to that, can you distribute or pop in the notes or something?
Yes, please. I can do that.
You got it. Perfect. Thank you.
Let us move on to TAC issue 175. Nigel is back to talk about the proposed AI ML working group. We had some conversation back and forth in the issue, and they have gotten us a new document to talk about some of the nuanced differences between their proposal and existing art. So Nigel, why don't you take away? We'll give you up to 15 minutes to have this conversation.
Yeah, sure. I think you said most of it there, actually. We have this proposed, hopefully you can see my screen now. We have this proposed AI/ML working group. And it's fairly popular. There's a regular 12. Can you see?
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to say, could you make it bigger? But it looks like you just did.
Yes, we can see.
Yeah, that's No, it's not. It's not growing. So yeah. So we have regular meetings, weekly meetings. There's an average of 12 people. We've got a mission statement that's been posted, and we brought this to the TAC 2 weeks ago for approval. The objection of it was that there was potential gaps and overlaps with other groups. We went away and several of the members wrote a gap document here, a gap analysis document. I've linked this in the meeting notes, and and the main things that were mentioned were the Linux Foundation. There's a Linux Foundation AI/ML working group, as OWASP as well. This is less relevant, but Sal put this in, well, she says it's less relevant. We've got some research groups, which again, they're not really focused on open source. So the analysis is here. I mean, there's certainly some overlap, but the group, we spent a long time discussing this in meetings, and we just feel that we're different enough. We discussed being SIGs, we discussed being working groups, we discussed actually just going to the LFAI group there. But internally with the group, we think we're different enough. So the proposal this week is, in the light of this document, does the TAC want to A, give us the approval to carry on, or B, give us another direction they'd like to take, and C, it's we don't have a sponsor yet, but we were going to ask the TAC for a sponsor there. So that's pretty much the summation of what I had to say. And there are questions.
So Ava, you're first, but other folks, if you have questions or comments, please get in queue. Ava.
Nigel, would you pull up that first slide you showed again?
The first slide. It's only one slide. There's basically
or the opening, the first thing you showed. That's this one. Yes, thank you. I'd like to point out that from the TAC process that does require vendor diversity, this is specifically in regards to companies that are committing to support work. Mere attendance at a meeting does not equate vendor support. Microsoft is not supporting this. So please remove our name from that list.
Oh, okay. That was just a list of the people who, I mean,
yes, like I said, attendance does not equal support. Yeah. Just because folks want to observe and learn what's happening.
Sorry, if I could just jump in. I would, instead of removing Microsoft, just change the title there, because, or just clarify, because all of these vendors, I don't know that VMware has officially stated they will whatever.
That's also a fair comment, Michael. I can't speak for any of the other vendors here. But I think it is a general thing that it is misrepresenting the attendance of meetings to assert that all these vendors are interested in supporting the work.
Yeah, people can't commit to it until we have approval from the TAC. It's kind of a circular thing that we have. So, yeah, okay. I mean, it's an absolutely fair point, and I stand corrected. Thank you.
Sal, please.
Yeah, so on the other document, there's still gaps that we could discuss. There's like LLMs that I haven't covered. There's, I mean, the SBOM stuff. There's a lot of work on that we haven't covered. There's a lot of good work out there. I keep coming back to the reason I don't care where this lives and I don't care what it's called. I don't care. I don't care. We really, really are lacking very specifically clear communication that is agnostic to product on AI security posture. And that is definitionally what OpenSSF to me as its end user does. That's why I'm still arguing for this position. Again, if this ends up a security thing instead of LFA, I don't care. I don't care. But getting this group of people together and understanding that that's the scope that I think that this is moving on, I think is important because it's a technical scope. That's it.
What other comments or feedback does the group, and specifically the TAC, have? I appreciate the group kind of spinning up this additional document to provide that clarity of the other efforts. I think this is very useful. But what do my other TAC friends have to say about this?
So if I misspoke, speak up. I mean, I in part provoked this, I suppose, because I raised the issue earlier of the positioning. And so I appreciate the effort that was put into putting in writing a little bit how this gets positioned. I think it would be good to, see at a high level. My reading of this was kind of, I put that in a GitHub comment earlier. I see this as being essentially at a high level. This is meant to be primarily focusing on developers as opposed to users, which maybe is more of the focus of LFAI Security Committee, for instance. And I think that's a valid differentiator if that's really what it is. I think this, I hope the group doesn't see this as just, mere administrative annoyance from the TAC, because I do think this exercise is useful. And IBM, I have to follow up on what Eva was saying earlier. I also don't know that IBM really supports this at this point, but of course we did participate to a certain extent we could, because we also want to know what this is going to be about. We are involved in other efforts, and we want to know, is it worth our resources, right? There's only so many resources we can throw at all these initiatives. And one point that was made by Nigel on the GitHub was, we seem to have enough mass here to make it worthwhile. And for me, that's a very bad argument. And it's not a popularity contest. We are trying to make sure that there's actual a good rationale for doing this here, not just because we happen to have enough people. It feels like, hey, yeah, let's do this. If it's competing with anybody else who's already working in the same space, we're just wasting everybody's time. So I think we have to be careful. And again, make sure that we have a focus area which is understood by us, but also we can communicate to others so that people say, hey, OpenSSF is looking at this problem. What are they focusing on? It should be very clear to them, oh yeah, they are doing this because it's different from what's going on elsewhere. Thank you.
We have David and then Brian.
Yeah, just wanted to reiterate exactly what Arnaud said and to sort of encourage Sal and Nigel that that's exactly what we discussed at the meeting, which is the differentiation between developers and users. And I think that's the key message that would be much more effective for you to communicate to the TAC and everyone else. That's the message, not we need this somewhere, not we don't care what the name is, not that we have people. Users versus developers, that's your golden thing, and focus on that, and that's the best thing for you to communicate.
Okay, that sounds great. Yeah, I appreciate the clarity, the extra clarity.
Focusing less on the merits and more on the process. One of the things that this process has smoke tested out is the working group proposal process. We are pretty clear what happens after something's voted in as an incubating working group, but not on this pre-incubation phase. What kind of support can it expect from LF staff and from the OpenSSF staff and infrastructure? But part of it as well sounds like an emerging requirement for kind of an explicit vote by this, still pre-incubation working group of either individuals willing to attach their name to a proposal or vendors, say, does Microsoft support this or not? And so I just want to flag that as part of, I don't know if it's Zach's work related to SIGs or the audit work, but somewhere we might need to improve the workflow document and the process documentation to articulate exactly what the expectations are of the, when something can enter incubation, because I feel like Nigel's done a brilliant job kind of navigating things as amorphous as they are, but I hear a plea for some clear process on this.
Yeah, there's certainly a bit of chicken and egg involved. People don't want to do anything until you get approval, and you can't get approval till you've done something. That's a definite problem in the process. I hear you saying that.
Yeah, and thank you for highlighting that. I'm sorry that it is not as a smooth, frictionless experience as we would desire. So that's feedback we'll take back. So we have Sal with comments and then Ava.
Yeah, my last comment, we are it's a vendor block. It's not an individual block that we're at right now. But the problem is this is open source, and the vendor block means that like it's a one-to-one. The vendor is represented by an expert. There are certain experts that I cannot get in the room until this is legitimized. And if it's not legitimized, we have to go do it somewhere else relatively soon. But I'm not saying that as a threat. Like I need a room that people agree to go to at some point within like 2 to 3 months.
Yeah, thanks, Sal.
Ava?
Just a minor comment on the process discussion. I love the feedback here, and I hope that everyone's able to learn from and capture some of this in our process docs. I know we have multiple efforts to improve them underway right now. In the past, when I've seen working groups reach this sort of a critical mass, it was pretty clear that there was a commitment from a number of people to sponsor the working group. I think seeing no hands go up in the last meeting or this one from the TAC to sponsor it, and the general hesitation to commit to starting this after some really excellent work has been done to explore the space, to write up these sort of comparisons, that might be a useful signal. It does stand in contrast to previous working group formations that immediately had reached that critical mass and signaled to the TAC to move forward. But we don't have a process to say no. I'm not saying no right now. I'm just pointing out that we've never had to have that discussion of how do we define that process before.
Yeah. Thank you for that feedback and comment, Ava. I will say personally, irregardless of what my feelings may or may not be about the effort, I donate 10 to 20 plus hours a week to the foundation. I cannot take on something else. So I would ask my other friends in the TAC if they are interested and able to consider working with this group of individuals if we all see merit in this effort moving forward. And I, again, really appreciate the fact that the process is not as smooth as it should be. And Nigel and the group, you've all done a very good job of reacting to the comments we've had. And I do appreciate that. And we'll try to make it better in the future.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Zach.
I have been intending to attend one of these meetings, and I was just checking my calendars, and I can commit to attending the AI/ML meeting on July 19th to better understand the group and what is taking place. Yeah, and we've been talking a lot about process, and then reviewing the process, it looks like there's sort of 2 votes that take place. One is for we don't really have a word for it, but proposed or forming working group to become incubating, which includes a TAC sponsor and a TAC vote. And then once incubating for the working group to become active, there's another TAC vote. And that is the process as I understand it today.
Thank you. Michael and then Jay.
Just a question on process. The TAC sponsored, is that a ongoing commitment to doing anything in particular? Because there's no TAC sponsor for identifying security threats, or is it just a kickoff and like make sure that the working group doesn't completely go sideways?
That's another gap. I'm going to cut the queue. Sorry, that's a little gap. It's supposed to be an ongoing commitment to help the working group liaise with the TAC.
Ah, okay.
So for example, the end user working group cornered me and made me commit to be their big brother and help them out. So I helped coach them through things. So and I participate there. So the intention is we have somebody from the TAC that is active in that community on some level. Jay.
So I listening to this and being heavily involved like I am with it, of course, my views here are very individual in nature. I'm interested in the topic area and I'm involved with the group heavily. Understanding what this group's, first of all, the OpenSSF's mission, how this group supports that mission. That's first. And every time we get into these meetings, we discuss this. Sal put together this list. We formatted it so that we could better understand what other groups are doing, how we differ from them, and then our partnership opportunities. what we would like to know from that point, whether or not the work should be done, we could debate that all day. But if the work can be done, are we headed in the right direction towards supporting the OpenSSF's mission and this work in general across the supply chain, across open source security, supply chain security? Are we headed in the right direction so we can continue to focus our efforts? We don't need to be, and I'm going to say this now, and I said this in the working group meeting, and a few of us have said the same thing. We can do the work. You don't have to be, we could be at committee level doing the work and then showing something later on and proving our work, right? We could have a proof of concept. Are we heading in the right direction to support that proof of concept? Because what I don't want to have happen is for us to be walking aimlessly through the woods here. I'll stop there.
Right. I need to table this excellent conversation. Zach is committed to go to a future call to kind of get a feel for things, and he'll share his feedback both in the issue and with the TAC. And we will hopefully have enough information for our next call to be able to make a decision. That sound fair, folks?
Okay. So
give a thumbs up or a thumbs down to these good people to help stop them waiting. All right, so Nigel, we will get back with you, and you'll see Zach at a future call. And I would encourage anybody else to from the TAC to participate and kind of help provide their feedback on the merits moving forward. And I do think this is something that should deserve some of our time to help evaluate and provide good feedback to.
Okay, thank you very much.
Jacques, can I limit you to 5 minutes?
You can limit me to 1 minute. Basically, this is an informational item. The end users working group has adopted and is continuing to iterate on a consumers manifesto, something that folks can sign up to, say we believe in these principles and we believe in these actions. From a mostly consumption point of view, we don't need any action from the TAC other than to inform you. We may further down the line ask or inform you that we're heading towards a blog post to talk about it. But that's it. That's all I got. The link is in the issue. If you're curious, let us know what you think. That's it.
Any questions or comments for Jacques or the end users? Please take a few moments and read the manifesto. It's not scary. It's friendly. Thanks all. And I will yield the floor to Ava, who had a topic they wanted to talk about today.
Thank you, C-Rob. Everybody, a little announcement to make. This is my last week at Microsoft. And so I'm going to be taking a break for a little while. You will still see me around security and open source once I'm back. And so in the interim, I'm going to hand my TAC seat to Jay to step in. I think you all know Jay White. He's been really involved here for a while. He's in the same team that I'm in. So functionally, in terms of both the TAC and my role and Microsoft's engagement, none of that should change. After my vacation, you'll still see me around, I'm sure, in the same hallways.
Excellent. Well, Ava, I want to say personally and professionally, thank you for your partnership. It's been a great couple of years collaborating with you.
Yeah. And to Brian's comment here, there is no process. This is not defined in our charters. So I guess if there's any objection from the TAC, I'm not sure what to do. There's no process for that either. Perhaps the board can discuss this in the next board meeting. But rather than deprive the TAC of a seat, I would like Jay to step in my spot.
Let's discuss and consider what our options are.
Fair enough.
And congrats.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I could just say I'm taking vacation and leave the seat empty for a while, but that seems rude to all of my peers in the TAC to deprive you of any engagement in this role. So.
So yeah, we will chat with Brian and Omkar and you and Jay and see what we need to do per the bylaws and what if there's if this is okay or it is not.
Sounds good. I leave it in all of your capable hands. And like I said, I'm sure I'll see you around.
Thank you.
Thank you, and best of luck. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for all your dedication. All right, folks, any final comments or questions in our last few minutes? Or do we wish to adjourn? Michael.
I had one just from the, I posted something to the TAC mailing list and you got back. So I figured since we have a few minutes, on the AO side, we would like to have substantive discussions over direction and thoughts and where we should focus, and not a status update, but more of a what is taxi? What do you like? What are you guys thinking? Like for reals? And we'd like this to be somewhat regular. So 10 minutes, not enough time. If an hour can't do, I'll take 30 minutes. But I think having this kind of deeper engagement and building a little bit more connective tissue between TAC and AO is good. I would posit that would also be valuable for any of the other associated projects. So I'm putting it out there. I'm on vacation for a couple of weeks, but certainly in August and into September, I think as folks are not on vacation as much, timing should work. So.
And as I mentioned in my reply, and I would encourage my TAC friends to contribute to that thread, I think the idea has a lot of merit. There are some things in the works. I know that OMCAR is having a staff meeting this week, and we'll be ideally getting the audit complete. We'll have his prioritization PR finalized by the end of this month. So hopefully we'll have a little bit firmer direction on where we will be heading. And I think after that would be a good time to start this more engaged dialogue. And I agree that this is probably something we need to implement for efforts of certain stature to make sure that we are directionally aligned and focusing in on the right things periodically. Sal.
Yeah, it's a note on AO because you all might be going on vacation, but you know who's not? The AO interns for the summer. Yeah, they're around. And if you haven't been interacting with them, go do it. It's like the most wholesome thing in OpenSSF right now. There's like AO office hours. You can go and they just want to like learn about security in like the broadest sense. Just go and have some fun and teach them something. Maybe they might teach you something. They're very good.
You're right. They are very good. Yeah. And also, I mean, we do have like regular meetings and things. So, show up, chat. If you want to learn more or just, whatever, like come chat with us, find us on Slack, wherever, just engage.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Please comment in Slack or on our mailing lists, and we will see you all in a future call. Cheers all. And we'll start the Sterling tool belt in a few minutes. Later.
Thanks, Cobb.